Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News podcast. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 14, and we're recording this. Nope, this is episode 29, I believe. This is episode 29, and we're recording this on November 11th, 2020. Each week we come to you with productivity news and technology news, and we do commentary on that. And but once in a while, there's a special event. Something comes up, like the Apple One More Thing event that happened. And so we're going to be talking to you about that today, and we're going to cover what Apple announced in their Mac lineup. And to do that, we brought a special guest, someone who is also an Apple fan, with Augusto to combat me on all things Apple. And that is Michael Sliwinski from Nozbe. He's the CEO of Nozbe. Michael is a productivity guy. He's the founder and CEO of Nozbe, where they have two productivity apps: Nozbe Teams, which is an uber functional to-do app for small and medium teams, and then Nozbe, a project management and collaboration tool for busy professionals. Nozbe Teams and Nozbe are web-based tools with apps for all the major platforms. Michael is also a speaker, author of best-selling books. He's a podcaster, a blogger, and he is happily married to his wife Evelina and their three daughters as well. Welcome to Anything But Idle, Michael.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Yes, great to have you. Great to have you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the Apple One More Thing event. And so let's just do initial impressions. What were your initial impressions, gentlemen, of the show? And we can go from there.
Okay,
Michael,
I can start.
Go for it,
just
Michael.
by saying that it was out of all these events, it was the one I was looking for most because it's an event for geeks. I mean, there is a major processor change, like major CPU change. This is for geeks, and I'm a geek, at heart. So for me, this was like, I like, new iPhones, whatever, like stuff, but like new processors. This is the big shift, and especially going from something that we know so well, like Intel processors, to something completely unknown. I mean, known on our iPads and iPhones, but unknown on traditional computers. So for me, this event was really, really cool, and I was hoping for significant speed improvements, but most of all, I was hoping also for a much longer battery life on the computers. And yeah, we got both. So yeah, I'm really, really happy and excited to check these things out.
Yeah, I agree with you. This was a geeky event. I was also geeking out and excited about listening what is coming. I think it can be something really cool what is going to come from Apple in the next years because of this.
As not the Apple fan on the panel, I don't have anything against Apple. So I was uniquely interested in the way in which they presented this, because is this their third event in 2 months? Is that what Tim Cook said? They are learning on the fly about how to put on these events and selling, in this way, really getting people jazzed up about it. And I have to say, I was really remarkably surprised that they did a great job in this third iteration of it. Wasn't, and from my perspective, wasn't as exciting as the HomePod announcement and having that home and everything else set up in the stadium or wherever they were in that big set. But I felt like they did a clean job. I think it was the cleanest of the three events now, and it shows that they are learning how to do these events in this more kind of production ready, web focused world in that way. So I was pretty impressed by that.
And they cannot get enough of the Apple spaceship office. I don't know how many more angles.
Beautiful.
They definitely love to show off the canvas. Oh, yeah. They really do.
But it's so beautiful. They were showing, and I have seen those. So, and it was still, in awe how spectacular that thing is.
Yeah, and especially now that in the pandemic times, like not many people are going to offices, so I'm sure like it's like usually empty. So that's why they at least they can use it for video shoots.
Right, it's a great studio set when it's
Oh yeah,
being basically empty all the time, right? What I really enjoyed was how they showed the different layers and the different colors as they went from floor to floor. I thought that was a really great effect, and it made the complex seem more like a sci-fi or a kind of like a spy movie kind of thing. It was really
yeah.
well done in that theme. Okay, so Tim Cook opens up the show, and he actually ended with this quotation, but I felt like it was really a powerful one to begin with. He said that our mission is to create products that make play a meaningful role in people's lives. And and in essence, he's announcing the first set of Macs that are founded on Apple Silicon and of course the M1 chip. And so then he turns it over to John Tiernes, who's their VP of Hardware Engineering, and he starts talking about some of the specs here related to the M1 chip. What stood out for you related to the M1 and its announcement?
I mean, as I said before, the speed improvements and everything, so many things they can pack quickly. And I think for them, the key is something that we've been talking about for years now, that with their own chip, they can iterate faster. So for them to build M2 in a year or M3 in 2 years will be really, really easy and barely an inconvenience, while waiting for Intel to catch up with stuff. So they don't depend on anyone else now. They depend on themselves. And the way they showed, like what they showed basically was what we already know from iPhone and iPad, but for the Mac. And for me, like, again, making making this technology so compact, so small, that this small processor has everything you need. The CPU, the GPU, all the cores, like the whole 9 yards, and then machine learning and whatever. It's amazing. And that's why I think we have this leap, this leap in battery life and in this leap in speed.
And it is really interesting because we have seen it in the 10 years of the iPad. And get it, Michael and I are heavy iPad users, iPad only users. But it's been really interesting what they have been able to do from the first iPad to the latest version. And I'm really excited to see, even that I don't use the Mac, really excited to see what now it's going to be the jump, because now they're going to be able to really march at their own speed, not depending on the speed, as you said, on Intel or anybody else. And that integration and that ability to really customize what the chipset will do and what the software will do will be incredible. And if we cover later more on Big Sur, I I've been playing with a release candidate on an old MacBook. I mean, I still have my old MacBooks at 2013. It's on the bottom of the upgrade line. It's going to be obsolete in the next 12 months. And it's still incredible the improvement on a speed that this machine got as soon as you put Big Sur. And that give me, if any, more excitement about M1 and M2 and M3 coming forward.
I have to say, I was uniquely interested in how this M1 chip was going to be announced and how it was going to really be positioned. The things that I really found to be quite interesting is 16 billion transistors on this item.
Yeah.
That's some
Yeah.
amazing nanotech to be able to really make that kind of etching happen. And the unified memory architecture, what they call the UMA, and
Yeah.
really bringing this single SoC on the Mac. This is really quite phenomenal. You kind of hinted on this, Michael, but in essence, they're putting all of the memory, components basically in one location for this M1 to be able to access, which of course creates, it doesn't have to do all of this, pulling from multiple locations. It can really access that in one place, which really to me meant greater speed, greater power management, that is less power being utilized for purposes of that. And when you do that, that's less heat. And that's really one of the number one problems with all of these devices being built is how do you keep heat low so that you can not burn up the silicon, and at the same time how can you increase the speed? And so this is really quite interesting for me. I'm curious to see how the memory chips really work on this kind of UMA, and whether other manufacturers will kind of fall in line now that they see what Apple's doing. I see there being some really powerful opportunities there for competitors to come out and kind of reverse engineer what they're doing.
I'm deeply concerned about Intel. Like, they are like, it was like a shot, in the back, because they are still playing catch up with their processors. They still live in this PC world, while we have smartphones, tablets, and now even computers with these chips. Like, they are completely, like, they seem like they are being surprised by this. They haven't seen that coming, and I'm not, I'm not sure that at some point they might, have the same fate as BlackBerry. They will just be obsolete.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what they showed was remarkable and certainly a shot across the bow for Intel. Just the whole idea that they're jamming all of these cores onto a single CPU, and they're capable of really getting this amazing amount of speed out of the system. They showed some really remarkable graphics in terms of speed over just what they consider the quote unquote latest PC laptop chip, which I find it to be kind of a
Ray,
fluff.
like, just think about, like, usually, like, in MacBooks, the improvements of performance were like 20%, 15%, 10%. Like, on the iPads, that's why I was upgrading my iPad very quickly, because with each iPad it was just remarkably fast, like lots faster. Only the recent change from iPad Pro to iPad Pro, the last two ones, where the change wasn't that big. But I'm sure, like, the new next year's iPad Pro will be much faster than the one that I have right now. But in PC land, it was 10-15%, and now it's 2-3 times faster again. Whoa!
Yes, that is the amazing part here is how much faster it's going to be, and this 3x higher performance per watt. I mean, that part actually really shocks me. I mean, that you can pull out that much more processing power with a per watt performance increase at 3x. That's really, really amazing. So I'm really excited to see what the M1 can do. I sit in a household that has many different operating systems, and we've got two MacBook Airs, and now thinking about whether or not to go with the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, as was announced, and we'll get to that shortly. But looking at these kinds of performance metrics, just the GPU processing power on the M1 seems to be really remarkable. So there's some really good stuff coming here, and so let's get into some of the particulars. So John Tiernus turned it over to, I'm going to get his name wrong, John Srouji, who was this SVP of hardware technology. And they went down to the basement and he got to talk about the SoC on the Mac and the UMA and all that other fun stuff. And they focused also on the Secure Enclave. They've brought the Secure Enclave from the iOS and iPadOS world, kind of the iOS devices, over to the Secure Enclave. Any thoughts there in terms of what they're trying to do there with the Secure Enclave?
Well, there comes the first disappointment of the evening, because not everything is positive today. So the first disappointment is the lack of Face ID. Like, we will talk about this, the particulars of each of these laptops, but Face ID is something I love on my iPad. Like, I just swipe up and it just recognizes me. It's just beautiful. And when you think about it, a laptop, like, you open it right in front of your face, so it could perfectly recognize you, and that's it. So I guess that they were in a hurry to launch the first laptops. That's why the first ones don't have that. So they just managed to cram the new stuff in an old design. That's why it's the first version. But in the future, I'm hoping for more. I'm hoping for, like, using the same technologies that we are spoiled by on iOS, to use the Secure Enclave, because this is where it saves my face. So I would like to see that in the future of MacBook.
Yeah, and now that they have come with Touch ID into that small factor, really charge me the $100 more and give me both. Okay, don't take me one or the other. Give me both. Give me both, so that way I can open my laptop with Face ID when I don't have my mask, or when I'm masked up. We don't know how long we're going to be masked up. I can use the Touch ID. Give me both. I agree with you. That was some something. But it's one thing that I was particularly excited was the fact that these Macs will be able to run three different kind of things. They will be able to run iPhone and iPad on the Mac from the Mac store. They are now going to be pushing for the universal apps and directly apps that will work, on everyone, the iPad and the Mac. So that gives me the hope that some of the apps that are behind on the iPad will be get that good. And if they are good on the Mac, I will be able to use them good on the iPad. And the second part is a transition to Rosetta 2 and how you will be able to use the legacy. But the idea of bringing some of my favorite apps that I use on the iPad every day to be able to work on the Mac, I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Taking a step back to the Secure Enclave, I found it to be interesting that they are putting the Secure Enclave onto these devices, because that's going to obviously expand the number of devices that are going to have it, and that means that they are utilizing this technology to put a message out there that they are security focused and that they are privacy focused in that sense as well. I'm really I'm like you, Michael. I was really expecting more in the Face ID space to be able to find that. It's one of those things that hopefully it comes in a future edition of the Mac lineup. The next step, of course, is that they go back to John Tierney and Tiernes, I'm sorry, and they announced kind of what Augusto was saying, which they announced macOS Big Sur, and that will be coming available on November 12th, right? So basically, if you're listening to this podcast, it will be out. So macOS Big Sur is coming out. What were the big changes that you noted in Big Sur in terms of interest? Anything in Big Sur yet? Augusto, I know you've been playing with the beta version.
I've been playing with it on old hardware. I don't have a recent Mac, and my next Mac will be an M1 when this gets obsolete. And the reason of that is I don't use the Mac for anything really other than put music into the iPad. Okay, that's the only thing for what my Mac is being used currently. There is no reason for me to update. That said, when I can get on the Mac to put iPad apps into the Mac, that may make me use the form factor maybe more. I don't know yet. Okay, but what I've been noticing, aside of the colors and the stuff and the speed on all hardware, it's been incredible, and I'm really curious to see what that speed means on the new chipset. Because if you have been able to just on software get that gain in an old hardware, I really want to see what that will mean in a new hardware. And again, I understand my Mac has 120 that's enough RAM. Okay, it's 16 gigs of RAM, but it's still a 2013 machine. Okay, that comes to my disappointed on hardware with this, but I will get into that later on.
Yeah. One thing before, I want to step back to this Secure Enclave again, just Ray, because I have a question. Because recently I've been setting up, helping other people set up their computers and their laptops and their, especially their smartphones, and whenever they would go to configure either fingerprint or their face, they would always ask me. So now Apple has my fingerprint. So now they know all about me. I'm like, no, it's stored on the device. Yeah, that's what they say. I don't believe them. So it's like, we have the Secure Enclave. We've been, brainwashed by Apple that this is on the device, but still people don't believe that. People assume this is going to be going to the internet and it's going to be used to profile them or whatever. So it's tricky that on one hand they have it, but nobody believes them that they do.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, and I think that a lot of people believe that of Android as well. They forget that this stuff is happening on device in order to keep it secure, and that also means that you can't particularly unlock a device from another device if you're using some of this technology, because there's a need for there to be localized security. And so, I think it's just going to require an ongoing education of the general public in terms of, one, we should always be skeptical of tech giants and what they're doing with our data. But at the same time, we should trust in some of the parts, because if we have no trust, then you shouldn't use them at all, right? Like if you have no trust,
Yep.
why are you going to complain about it? Just don't use it. It's kind of like people who tell me that they distrust, putting things on the web or using
Yeah.
e-commerce, and I'm like, okay, well, if you have absolute desire for security, unplug, turn off your internet.
Yeah.
There's this kind of there's a chasm between I can be secure and do right things to be secure, and
Mhm.
I'm tinfoil hat, and conspiracy theorizing. I really do believe that Apple is doing the right things with the secure enclave, and I would like to see that brought across all devices. And I'd like to start seeing now on the Windows side, I'd like to start seeing Microsoft making some inroads in doing some of this work there, to build out something very similar. They've got some level on, like, lowest level architecture to be able to start working on some of these pieces, and I'd like to see them make a move there, especially on the Surface line. I mean, they could absolutely do this on the Surface line since they have control on
Yeah.
that level, and that would push the rest of the OEMs to start making inroads there. When they finally turned it over to Craig, who's the SVP of software engineering, and I'm not even pronouncing his last name because I don't want to butcher it. But Craig, he talked about three different things: speed, power, and security. And we've already talked about, of course, security. But on the software engineering side, he really was talking about the fact that now you're able to do so much more with the M1 chip, because Apple has Apple Silicon, right? That they are doing all of this in their own closed ecosystem. I have problems with that because I am an open source advocate. I believe in us having greater access to it. Not that Windows is open source, right? And Windows is a proprietary system, but those operating systems based on the Linux kernel are a little bit more open, in not a little bit more open, but much more open than the Apple world. But what Apple is capable of doing here now, though, is remarkable because they are controlling the entire ecosystem. And so, what do you think is going to happen now that they have announced that all apps, Apple apps, basically are capable of running on the M1 chip? And did I get it right that all iPhone and iPad apps will now run on macOS Big Sur with Apple Silicon M1?
Yeah, I mean, from a developer perspective, I can tell you that we still have to check it out, and we checked it already. We have the Apple Developer Kit, so the Mac Mini with A12 Z processor. So we have it in our company, and Radek is testing it, and our apps already compile and work like this. There are a few tweaks that you have to do as a developer to make sure that they really run well on the devices, and you have to change some settings to make sure that they display on the Mac App Store. But yeah, in theory, what Augusto said, you can basically have a Mac that opens just iPhone app or an iPad app as a normal app on your computer, and this way you have access to like a lot of apps for on your new M1 powered device. So I think this is a brilliant move, again, because they've been lacking with good Mac apps. Now you can have just the iPhone and iPad apps. Also, having iPhone apps for productivity, from productivity standpoint, it's really cool because they are small, they're really nice narrow apps, and you can put a few of these, and on the sides, for example, of your white screen, and just work on your stuff and just use these apps around them. And I think it's cool. I think it would be like there will be lots of use cases for these smaller apps appearing on your desktop.
Yeah, I'm not that big of a fan of the widget concept on Mac OS, but I can really see utilizing some iOS apps now on the Mac OS environment. Basically having I don't know what they call it now, desktops or spaces or whatever. Basically having multiple desktops and having basically a little kind of mosaic of applications that I
Oh
want
yeah.
to have running to have as a dashboard.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that are going to be really cool. And I think even as a developer also, and this is a question for Michael, as a developer also seems that it will simplify the development for apps for these three platforms. You don't have now, I mean, yeah, there was going to be details, but don't have now three teams or three people who need to have three different skills to develop. You will be able to have a team to develop, and that will speed up not only software coming out, but also functionality coming out. And they hopefully will means that the software that you're going to be able to install on your phone, and your iPad, and your Mac will be more consistent. That is one of the headaches for users.
Yeah, and especially on Nozbe and Nozbe Teams in both applications, we made sure that you have the same functionality on a mobile phone that you have on the desktop. So you're not losing out on functionality. It's not like it's a companion app, that you can add a task and that's it. It's a true app. So people will be able to choose. Like our customers will be able to choose. Do I want to use the web view? Do I want to use the full Mac app? Or I can just use this small iPhone app here on the side, add my tasks, move between projects, and it's good. So I think, again, diversity for everyone, just more choice, and I think just convenience.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see this. Chrome OS was probably the first ones to come out the gate and establish this idea of bringing Android applications to the Chrome OS environment, to a desktop environment. Now Windows came out and partnered with Samsung to be able to start bringing Samsung, again, Android applications to the desktop environment. Here we are now with Apple doing it, and we'll likely do it in they'll say they invented it, but
of course they did.
I don't understand your point.
Yeah, but they will do it, I believe, in probably a very cohesive way, and I'm very much looking to play with this, because this is a real I think this is a real productivity game changer, and there are very few of these that I've ever kind of noted as game changers, just not to be too cliche, but the idea here is really powerful, and I want people to kind of just start thinking about that. If you are in the Apple ecosystem, you no longer have to choose an either or proposition. You can say, I want to use this and that means that in many development environments where you have smaller developers who are producing companion apps, now you have the ability to do those, and to the effect that maybe you do want a lesser feature-rich application in your environment because it focuses you on things. So there may be opportunities here where you're saying, okay, well, I don't want the full-fledged app on my desktop. I just want the lightweight one so that I can focus on just these few things. So I can see there being some productivity opportunities there that are not just limited to, I want different kind of form factor-ish size. I want different features with different applications. I'm curious how that will all work out in the end. Talk to me about this universal apps ecosystem, where they're basically binding an Apple Silicon and Intel-based native binary version. What's going on there? And they noted the Omni Group and Adobe. Was it Adobe? That both were releasing these applications kind of initially among their other developers. What does this mean for people going forward? How do universal apps work?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that when you compile the application, you compile them for both systems at a time. So basically like you have two apps in one. There was this yin yang, icon. So you have both apps already compiled. So just your operating system, depending on your chip, launches one or the other. This way, there is no simulation, there is no emulation, there is no something in between, no medium person there in the middle. It just launches this app. So it's really important, because this way, once you have an app ready for this, every customer that downloads this app from the Mac App Store gets the same experience. Like that, it's a native app for them. So, for example, on my old iMac, it will be an Intel-based app and will work natively. But on a new M1 MacBook Air, it will just launch the other one, and it will be native, it will be fast, it will just use all of these new technologies, all of these, cores and stuff. Exactly. So this is something, again, developers have to prepare for. That's why they highlighted Omni Group that's already doing this. Omni Group is a very, very well-known, great Mac, powerhouse. The Adobe has to take more time. That's why they said in the beginning of next year, because they have to make adjustments, and we have to do the same thing when we will be preparing Nozbe Personal and Nozbe Teams binaries for this also in the beginning of next year, because there are quite a few changes that we have to do to adjust, to these frameworks and stuff. So there is some on the code level. You have to it's not only settings and clicks. Yeah, on the code level, you have to adjust some of the stuff to make sure that it compiles well for the M1. So that's why it takes more time for developers, and that's why they can be ready, because they're Apple. They just use their own apps, so it's fine. Although I'm sure that some of their apps, are still not fully compiled, because they might not have made it. But we developers have to work a little bit on this. But once we do, we can bring the same native experience to everyone.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really important and powerful for people to know, which is that the developers that you know and trust and are using need to basically create universal apps so that you are able to have the same experience across legacy Macs and new M1 chipped Macs. And then we go on to Rosetta 2. Augusto alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I think it bears kind of discussing, which is that if you have a Mac app that is Intel based, it's supposed to run Intel based, and you now want to use that application on Apple Silicon based chips, or Apple Silicon chips on those Macs, you will still be able to, because of Rosetta 2. And so talk to me a little bit about the history here, because we had Rosetta 1 when they went from the former, what was it?
PowerPC to
yes,
Intel.
I always get that wrong. PowerPC to then the Intel chip. That transition required them to have to create this software in the first place. So they've created now this next transition. What are your thoughts there as Apple users about using legacy Intel-based software on the Apple Silicon?
I'm sure my memory is much kind right now than what it was when we used Rosetta 1. But I don't remember. I remember that most of the applications work okay on Rosetta 1. And yeah, you get the other thing bouncing on the screen. You knew it was a Rosetta. But I don't remember it for most of the applications, it worked well. And it was not such a long or painful transition. Developers went decently quick, even on those times where getting hardware or software was challenging. Let me remind you, that was the time of the 28 or 56K. If you were lucky, you would have 56K and you were trying to download the update, and after you have 3 or 4 hours downloading, the thing die at 98 and you need to start. But I don't remember the Rosetta 1 as being a bad thing. So I'm really not expecting that we are going to see a lot of pain with Rosetta 2. Again, I may be seeing with my pink glasses right now.
No, not really, because we tested quite a few apps on our developer kit. So the one that we got from Apple, that we bought from Apple. Anyway, so what happened there, even on the slower processor, lots of apps were working pretty fine. Like in Rosetta 2, it was like I remember Radek was pretty surprised that they just launched and it was fine. And also, again, going back to developers, some developers will just decide not to do the extra work to have the universal app, because the Rosetta 2 app will just work so well that it would just be for them, like additional 20-30 hours of work, not worth it, because the app is fine, it works great, like there is no need to port, because it just works fast anyway. So they will just not do it. So on one hand, that's great that Rosetta 2 is so fast. On the other, of course, you would want to have pure native apps as a customer, but very often I think you will not see the difference, which is good.
Yeah, I'm really curious about whether or not that becomes a selling point. I mean, I don't have the rose-colored glasses regarding Rosetta 1. I remember again, I was supporting, lawyers in a law firm environment, and having Macs running certain basically PowerPC-based software now on these new Intel chips. There was a lot of headache and heartache and long hours in supporting those. But because we saw an immediate hit, and there were some issues there. But that being the case, I think Rosetta 2, even to Craig's note about this, which is that he's seeing some of these Intel-based applications running faster on Rosetta 2 than on their Intel, counterparts. So that's really great to see. What I'm curious about, though, is that there was an argument that developers could make back then, which is, hey, we developed native applications for these Intel chips. will you be able to do that with M1 and Apple Silicon when some of these older applications are running just as well or better on using Rosetta 2. So I'm a little bit again, something to pay attention to and something that I'm
We'll
really
see.
looking forward to seeing. Again, John Tiernes then turns it over to Laura Metz, the Mac product line manager, and this was to announce the first new MacBook Air.
Yes.
What were your thoughts there about the new MacBook Air? For those listening, it was a heart emoji.
Yes. So look, before I switched to the dark side of the iPad, I was MacBook Air lover. Like I was when they announced this vanilla envelope and stuff. When Steve Jobs announced the first a MacBook Air, I fell in love with this. And I did everything I could to earn my money to buy one with SSD. I remember I bought a used one at the end of the year, and I fell in love with it. It was underpowered. It had some issues with some cores dropping, all that stuff. It was a pain in the butt machine, but I loved it. It was just glorious, gorgeous. It's like, I love it. So now, and because in the meantime, they kept the MacBook Air. They finally bumped it to a reasonable, computer, very good computer. But later, they waited too long for the Retina transition to have the Retina screen on it. So it was kind of annoying. And the new one with Retina screen had the crappy keyboard, which was another problem of Apple's. So we shouldn't forget that they had this, problem with keyboards for 3 years running, and claiming that the keyboard is fine, only affects some users. But now this new MacBook Air with this super processor M1, with the normal keyboard, with a good keyboard, with no fan at all, this is a glorious machine. This is something to get. It's like hands down, this is the machine to get. If you are in a market for a new laptop, this is the one to get. Like, I'm sure for most of the users, the power in this fanless machine and 18 hours of productivity, no power cords, just carrying it around without the power brick at all. Fantastic. I'm in love.
The keyboard was only to certain users. The users trying to use the keyboard. If you didn't use the keyboard, you have no idea.
And like, we type so much. My daughter, her definition of my job as CEO of Nozbe is, my dad writes random things on the internet. So this is my official job definition. So, like, I write random stuff on the internet. So to write random stuff, I need a good keyboard. So
absolutely. Or Siri needs to dictate everything, type everything for you.
Yeah, but with my Polish accent, it doesn't work.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I've been showing on screen some of the pieces here. Just a couple of notable items they had here, and a little bit of this is repeating what Michael just noted here. But they said it's a 3.5x, that is 3.5 times faster CPU, 5x faster GPU, 2x faster SSD, faster SSD. So so up to 2 terabytes of SSD storage, and it's 2 times faster. I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, I'll give them that. It comes with a silent design, basically no fan, 15 hours of wireless web browsing, 18 hours of video playback on a single charge, and that gives you then 2x the battery life on video calls. That is also really remarkable, because so many of us are spending so much time on video calls today, and I'm sure that's only going to accelerate now, even after the pandemic is over. Touch ID, we already talked about the lack of Face ID, and then I couldn't quite get the specs in terms of the ports on it. I'm guessing they'll show us the ports on this, but I saw at least 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports on one side of the MacBook Air. Were there other things on the other side, outside of the power cord? And I'm guessing it's MagSafe. So I'm not sure, but it does use Apple Pay, which is really nice with the Touch ID. So you can make passwords, and you can also password protect documents using Touch ID. That is something that I didn't know before looking at all the documents. They also
to answer your question, no. And one side has 2 Thunderbolt USB 4, and on the other side has a headphone plug.
Okay, so a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the other side. So
Correct.
those are the three ports on the outside of it. It is supporting Wi-Fi 6, which is great. Looking forward to seeing how the Wi-Fi 6 works on those devices. All right, great. So that is the MacBook Air. I will note that one of the things that I found to be kind of, I don't know if it's right to make this argument, but why no touchscreen? Like, I'm really curious why no touchscreen on these devices.
Yeah, I think the main thing again is that they rushed to produce these laptops without making too many changes, and this would be a dramatic change to have the touchscreen. Big Sur is already kind of ready for this to be able to touch it. Like when you look at Big Sur, lots of things have been bigger, as a tap target. So I think this will be, and the problem with the screen on a laptop like this, it's very wobbly. Like you just touching on this is not really, like, it's very thin, it's too thin. And of course, Steve Jobs, Johnny Ive, make it thinner, make it thinner. Philosophy comes in. So of course, and that's why I think they will have to rethink the form factor, because if they want to put the Face ID, if they want to put a better camera than the 1720p front-facing camera, and if they want to put a touchscreen, it will have to be sturdier. There will have to be a different hinge, and it will have to be thicker. Like there is no other way to go. So I think it's a complete rethink of form factor, and this is something only Apple could do this. And this is something Apple can do later. They need time for this. They were not ready. They just had to. They wanted to rush with the latest processors. They didn't do anything else. So there's lots. But the processor, the M1, I'm sure it's capable of doing this. So it's just a question of not wired yet. So I think we'll just have to be patient, and wait a year or two.
And there's an argument that they're trying to keep their iPad sales up, and so that will eat into it'll cannibalize their iPad sales to some extent. I'm not sure it will do as much damage as they think it will,
Mm-mm.
but I think that it will be welcome for me, because as I'm using all of my devices, I am used to touching all of the screens, and then I get to my MacBook and it does not, and it is frustrating, and that is not the experience or the brand that Apple has designed. So I'm really looking forward to having that.
Anybody who has kids knows that kids are used to touchscreens everywhere. They even touch, the big television sets and are disappointed that nothing happens. So yeah, like this has to happen. Like this is inevitable. They are trying to defend the optimum usability aspect or ergonomics, but no, it's like it's coming.
But you made a great point on the thin and the form factor, because I know people who don't like to make their iPad as a main machine, not from a capability perspective, but from the fact that the laptop being the heavy part on the bottom instead of the screen make them better for their work style. So that's a really interesting point to consider. And I'm not saying I also wanted, because I'm so used to the touchscreen, but I understand that, and I understand that if you make it that way, you may need to make it thicker. Therefore, you may need to make the bottom heavier. So that gets into a challenging balance. My complaint with this is, as you love that, and you talked with that first uncapable MacBook Air with so much love, I talk about my MacBook Air 11-inch with the same love. And that is the reason my MacBook is so old, is because I cannot upgrade the MacBook Air 11-inch to a newer thing. Okay, they discontinue that size. I understand that size is the nightmare of every developer, web developer, okay, because the screen is so odd, but it is such an awesome machine, and I will have loved to see a more compact factor than 13-inch. We have the screens. We know what they have done it on the iPad. I know this is on my wishful list thing, maybe under that touchscreen thing. Okay, I wish Apple comes with a small factor, super compact laptop, as it was the MacBook Air.
You're gonna have to
11-inch.
keep on wishing. You're gonna have to keep on wishing. I
I'm
retired
aware
my
of that.
MacBook Air 11-inch. I really did like it for just like quick, gonna run out to the cafe and do a little bit of work kind of thing. It wasn't great for long amounts of work, and which is why I think something more like an iPad Pro, 12-inch, you're going to get a nicer experience to do longer form work if you're going to go out, and do some work. I think this 13-inch MacBook Air is kind of the right size for that kind of work. I do like the ability that it could like almost fit, like in anything, just a little small satchel you can throw the 11-inch and go from there. I'll note that the MacBook Air, the new MacBook Air, this 13-inch is going to come out at $999 USD, and that'll be available on 11/17 for those who are chomping at the bit to go ahead and order and have that available. Okay, moving along, John Tiernes then turns us over to an introduction of the new Mac Mini, which I was actually looking forward to. I was hoping that they would announce a new Mac Mini for my own needs, but then he turns it over to Julie Brahms, Senior Manager of Hardware Engineering. And again, I know we noted this in the last show, but I'm glad that they keep turning this over to people who are on these teams, who are using the tools and helping develop these products, and they're really doing a great job of bringing that personality out and the diversity there. So, what'd you hear about the Mac Mini? What'd you think about the new Mac Mini?
Again, I'm a laptop guy. I'm an iPad guy, actually, not even a laptop guy anymore. Okay. But I think for a lot of people, this is cool. This is what they need. It's still the form factor is still incredible. And honestly, until Michael mentioned it, I did not thought about the form factors and the hurry and they tried to make it faster and why they didn't change or introduce any change on those hardwares. I did not consider that or thought about that idea until you mentioned it. But I don't know if that Mac Mini needs really any change on the form factor. It's a classic. It works really well, and the fact that you now connect to a 6K monitor, I understand. I live on my iPad. I don't understand what a 6K monitor. That's now above my pay grade. I struggle imagine 4K. So going to 6K now, that's above anything I can imagine on what that will mean.
Yeah, especially that the 6K monitor costs $5,000, and the only the leg, the stand of the monitor costs $1,000, which is $300 more than the Mac Mini. So they basically could just sell the new 6K screen with the Mac Mini for free. Like you just throw it there, like as an afterthought, basically. But it's funny that Mac Mini it had a time when it had no love. It was just completely not neglected by Apple for like 4 years, I think, or more. And then suddenly they upgraded it to Intel, to the latest Intel. And this is actually the machine that we recently got for our company because we need a Mac Mini server. So this way we can, compile our apps on this dedicated server without, compiling it internally on our computers. So we use a Mac Mini a lot in our team. But as you said, this is a great entry-level Mac. And I think they realized that. They realized how many people who are just budget constrained and have a monitor, they just want to have a Mac. So they just buy a $699 computer without, spending $999, which is a great price point for the Air. So I think it's a great move by Apple to just, democratize Macs, like just to be able to give Macs to more people.
Yeah, I want to have a test machine. And I think that this will be it. This is inexpensive. It allows me to, I'm looking at either the Air or the Pro, which we'll talk about next, as being kind of the travel laptop on the go. And now I have my Chromebook of choice. I have my MacBook Pro or MacBook of choice that I'm going to take on the road once I go back to traveling for work.
Yeah.
Right now, I traveled all of no distance to go to work today. But the idea here is that this fits, in my desk setup. I have now the ability to just tuck the Mac Mini underneath the desk, get a KVM switch, and I have a nice tool to be able to do testing. And especially since I test a lot of software, I want to make sure that it works on various devices. This is a great tool. It comes with Ethernet, which is really, really, I think, important, imperative for me. It has 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports on the back, HDMI 2.0, so it comes with an HDMI port on the back, and then 2 USB A's, so it's helping to deal with some legacy issues, and a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So really good set of cabling available to it. Also Wi-Fi 6 capable, which is great right out of the box. You're just capable of plopping it down, plugging it in, and connecting to the web there. And I also see this as a great option for just having it as a file server. Just having it just sit there and kind of capture all those things. You could put 2 terabytes on it, and you're good to go in terms of things. So I was very pleased to see the Mac Mini get some love and attention and it coming onto the market.
Well, and we have talked about here before, there is a little thing called the Luna display. So the Luna display will most likely work with this machine, so you can get that thing, put the Luna display on the back, and now turn your iPad into the main monitor for that headless MacBook, Mac Mini, that will make it really, really awesome. So it's on my sentence list.
So that's coming out at $699 USD, and again will be available on 11/17. And that brings us now along to they kind of switched it up. They went MacBook Air, Mac Mini, and now over to the MacBook Pro. And what I'm presuming hoping is their biggest seller. I'm not sure. Maybe there's argument that this will not be their biggest seller, but I think that it will. John Tiernes then turns it over to Shruti Haldia, who's their Mac product line manager, and they announced the new MacBook Pro 13-inch. And what did you think about the new MacBook Pro 13-inch?
My first comment to that was, and again, I did not think about this. It was, well, the specs are really so close to the MacBook Air. Unless you're doing a lot of rendering and videos and stuff, it makes no sense to get other than a quiet machine. So I'm curious to hear from both of you why will be the argument. And obviously the difference in price is not necessarily a big difference. It's $200. It's not really a big deal. But if you're not doing rendering, you're not doing heavy graphics, the MacBook Air seems to me will be plenty and more than enough of a machine. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about the difference on this being the same chipset. Again, understanding, as Michael said previously, hey, they came and they do it quick, so they didn't touch the specs or any of that. They just wanted to have these first machines out. So
so I'm just checking the specs. That's why I was looking here away, because for me, one of the arguments for the MacBook Air are lack of fan, so it's going to be really quiet. But this again is important. Like the difference between the Air and the Pro is that if you are doing something on something really heavy, CPU hungry in a long period of time, you need the fan, you need the cooling system, because the Pro will be able to keep that peak performance longer than the Air. So it just depends on your workflow. But for example, for the weight, I was expecting a big difference between Air and the Pro, but the difference is negligible. Like it's 2.8 pounds versus 3 pounds. So it's basically the same weight. It's a little bit more bulk. So the Pro is a little bit bulkier because it's just the same height all over the place, 0.6 inch. And this one goes from 0.6 to 0.1 inch. So it's really like the silhouette is still there. So in terms of performance, I think the performance, will be the same, just, longer performance on the Pro. So I think it just depends on your preferences here. It's like the price, as you said, difference is also not that big. So I think for a normal casual user who just, and I am one of these, because I don't compile anything. I don't need any, longer performance on a long period of time, apart from a Zoom call. So I think for a Zoom call, it should be enough. Even with this crappy 720p camera, I would go with the Air. because it's going to be nicer to handle. It's going to be just smaller in bulk, and bulk is really important. So even if the weight in normal terms is almost the same, the perceived weight will be different. So I would still go with the Air for like most of people.
And you bring an interesting point that, and I may be getting into look into the future, but the form factor, it's the decision. Okay,
Mhm.
do you like this form factor more? It's not really, unless you do really specific things, it's not anymore about performance, getting the Air, getting the Pro. And I think what we are going to see between the iPad Pro and these MacBooks is exactly the same. It's not, maybe in the future, maybe 2 3 years down, but what we are going to see is not going to be anymore, okay, I work on the iPad or I work on the Mac or I work in this machine. Is what is the form factor that works better based on what you do? What is the form factor that you like? And what is the form factor that you work better with?
So I heard something a little bit different in terms of their setup for the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air, which is that it came with this 3 mic array for kind of what they are calling kind of studio quality
Uh-huh.
audio. So that may be the only difference in terms of the specs there. And then
Hmm.
they talked about an advanced camera ISP, which allowed for better video on the MacBook Pro. I'm not quite sure what that means, but they're touting an HD camera on the Pro, so that may be a minor difference there. Not sure. I'll have to see them side by side to see whether or not they actually provide better stuff on that level. But you know, as you said, at 720p, you'd need an external camera no matter what if you're going to do high def stuff. Certainly recording. So you're gonna not care about that between the two models. So they're coming out with a 1299 USD starting price point, and they have an 1199 USD version for education. So I'm guessing there's a discount for those who are maybe teachers and students and otherwise. So that's nice of them to be able to do. Is it true that I heard they have 60% less energy consumption on these devices? Was that what he said about them? It was kind of a side comment that he made as John Tiernes was kind of turning it over to Tim Cook. I thought that was remarkable. They made just a minor note about environmental impact and how these devices were really helping to lessen their environmental impact, and I thought that was really remarkable.
Just think about it, like these laptops can last almost 20 hours or around 20 hours, both of them. I mean, the Pro a little bit longer, but still, like it's dramatic. Like you start your day with your laptop, you never charge it, you go through the day and more, and then you put it to charge at night, and that's it, and it's still at 30 or 40%. Like, it's crazy. So yeah, for me, like, I always prioritize that. When I was still in the in early 2000s, choosing my laptops, I wanted also always a thin laptop, a light laptop, and then one with lots of battery power. That's why Macs were always kind of superior to Windows very often, because the like Windows laptops were around 3 hours, and then Macs were 5, 6, 7 hours. So I always, I was envious that they had so much more power. Now it's just crazy. Like this is crazy stuff. Like 20 hours. It's like nobody will work so long on a laptop. But it just shows that you hardly ever charge it. You just use it, and that's it. So cool.
I'm hoping they bring wireless charging to these laptops eventually, and that way you can just just kind of set it on your desk. It charges when you want to, and you walk away, and like a nice a desktop charging pad where you could just put
Yeah.
your phone and your iPad and your laptop, your MacBook on this like kind of desk pad, and then you just lift it and go off, and you never really think about powering anymore. That it just becomes a natural part of the ambiance, right? It's just a part of the general area, and I think that's where we really need to get to with regard to that.
Yeah, so let's bring the non so positive in this one. And again, I think on the light of what we have been discussing, it's a matter of how fast they try to do it. The Pro as well as the Air has exactly the same amount of ports. Okay, both has just two Thunderbolt USB 4 that I'm sure we are going to see people complaining about on the interwebs about how many little ports it has, but it's what it is.
Yeah. So finally, the ecosystem of docking stations and all these peripherals is finally like going up. Like you can have really great docking stations already for a USB-C. I have a good one really for my iPad Pro. So for anyone who's complaining about the dongle gate and all that stuff, I would ask them to really consider finally getting a proper like kind of hub where they can have the HDMI, they can have the USB-A, USB-C pass-through, power, jack, like all these things. They can have that, and it's just so much more convenient to just put your laptop on the desk and just connect one cable, and that's it. You're done. So really, like from productivity standpoint, we've always been touting that you should have as fewer. I mean, you have to have this. You should have this whole thing set up, and you just plug it in, and that's it. So instead of just plugging in so many things, each time you just walk away, and especially that you have a laptop that is capable of just running on battery. So the moment you are on the desk, just plug it in with one cable, and you're done.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to look at that, because just from a speed of connection and moving from mobile to desktop, being able to just have a single, click in and go, that's really ideal. And I think that is a definite productivity gain on that level. I think I noted at the beginning, macOS Big Sur is available November 12th. So if you're listening to the podcast, it is now available. And then Tim Cook ended the show. Although I guess you could argue that the PC guy ended the show, but
the PC guy ended the show. I will argue that we root in this house for PC guy, and there was shouts when PC guy came out.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts regarding the One More Thing event from Apple, and maybe a little bit of discussion on what you think is coming down the pike after this initial set, right? Very quickly put together, and they wanted to get this out. They were excited about the M1 chip. What do you think is the next or the next few things that Apple is going to talk about in their next event?
Well, I'm curious to, they launched on the previous event the iPad Air that is incredibly powerful. So I'm holding off to see what's coming for the iPad Pro, because if that's what they did with the iPad Air, I'm really curious what's going to be the new iPad Pro. But I think this is great. What we're going to be able to see now is users will pick their device of choice, but everything will be invisible. I have said for many years that one of the reasons I love to work in my iPad is the fact that I can grab my 13-inch, I can grab my iPhone, or I can grab my iPad mini and have exactly the same productivity environment. And I consider that an asset to that way of work. I don't need to rethink what I'm going to open or how I'm going to work or anything. Being able to transport that also to the desktop or also to a MacBook Air, a MacBook Pro, I think productivity-wise, it's going to be incredible. That doesn't matter the form factor you get. All the same tools in the same configuration will be ready for you right there, and that will be super powerful.
And I think especially, right now that these laptops are so powerful and so fast, many developers will want to have both, like an iMac. So I'm looking for an iMac with a M1 or M2 processor. This would be for me the only reason to upgrade my iMac, because it's still very good, my 5-year-old iMac. So it's it would be great. But with that, Augusto, I think they should really reconsider like building it in the system so that you can easily replicate the system. So when you have two Macs, like the laptop and the desktop, you shouldn't have to manually configure them. You should just be able to have the same apps. Like, when you download a new app, it shows also there. And when you configure it, it configures the same way. Like this way, you will not have these headaches of just, I don't have the latest version of this program on this thing because I haven't been using it for 2 weeks. It should be invisible. It should be really invisible, so that when you are working on your iMac or iMac Pro and you want to just go and take your laptop with you, it has the same things. So over there, I think there's still lots to be done on the software side, but we're getting closer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a
I
great
agree.
point. That is a great point, and I hope that all development on that OS level, especially, starts to pick up those pieces. Especially now, as I said, Chrome OS and Android. We're seeing more of Windows and Android, and now we're seeing Apple's Mac OS and iOS and iPad OS starting to merge. And these experiences should be seamless. They should not have to be thought about. We should just be able
Yeah.
to move from one device to the other, and that makes it all the more worthwhile. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, before we close out?
Yeah. So my last, thing again, because of the form factor, they haven't done it. Um, but I would argue that with this form factor, they could have done it. Is the modem? There is no LTE connection on these devices, which is still annoying because I'm sure it's doable, and especially with the new M1 chip. Because one thing I love about my iPad Pro is that I don't think about my internet anymore. I just go to a cafe, I just pull it out, and I'm online. Like there is no I have my data plan. It's fine. It's unlimited. Whatever. It just works. I don't even ask for a Wi-Fi password of the cafe. I prefer to use my 4G connection. So when you compare this to having a laptop and still asking for a Wi-Fi password or tethering, in your internet through your phone, it's still a pain. You would want to pull out this beautiful MacBook Air and just be online.
As a person who was later to adopt exactly what you described, my first LTE iPad was the 9.7 Pro. That was the first time I got that. And after and my argument before was, well, I can tether the phone if I don't have internet. That's fine. And when that was available for me, I discovered there was a bunch of tasks that were 2 minutes that I could do because I didn't need to spend a minute and a half connecting the phone to make it happen. So my productivity really went soaring. So, and after that, I said, I never again will get another iPad without that. And I agree. If you work in a laptop, that will be simply incredible. And it's possible. Come on. PC has been doing this for a long time, not with enough battery, but with enough time.
Yeah, and Chrome OS has embraced that as well. They've really done a great job of bringing LTE versions to it. Plus, just the in Chrome OS now it automatically tethers to your phone. It just picks it up and goes automatically. And doing the same thing on iOS and macOS. Does it not do that now? If you're on an iPad, does it automatically pair to your phone?
I think it does a better job now, but as I'm not using it at all because I'm just using
Same
the
thing.
iPhone.
I have not used it in so long that I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. But I think it just makes a lot of sense that you have an option where you want to have a stable internet connection that is founded on the device itself. So good critique there, and I hope Apple's listening. I hope you're listening, Apple.
Yeah.
All right. With that, thank you, Michael. Michael Nozbe from Nozbe. Michael Sliwinski from Nozbe, the CEO of Nozbe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Wonderful. All right. With that, it looks like we have covered the Apple One More Thing event. Thank you, Augusto Pinaud, for joining me here, as always, on Anything But Idle.
Thank you very much. It was really fun.
And wonderful. If we missed something from the Apple's One More Thing event, feel free to leave a comment. You can go ahead and tweet at us at Anything But Idle on Twitter. Our DMs are open, so you can also direct message us there at Anything But Idle. You can also go to anythingbutidle.com. We have a contact page. You can subscribe to the podcast there. You can leave comments on the episode page and all that other fun stuff. Feel free to like or thumbs up or review the podcast. That helps us grow our listening community, and so thank you for doing that. And with that, until next time.
Before we close, we want to take the time today. We are recording live on Veterans Day, so we want to take a moment to thank every and each one of the veterans who listen to the show, don't listen to the show, and we are really grateful for all that you have done. And if you are listening on the podcast on the next day, I still will be, or we will still be really grateful of your service and everything you did.
Yep, especially my brother Alex. He's a veteran. Hi, Alex. I know you're listening. All right. With that, here's to your productive life. Take care, everybody.